About me, I've done a lot of work on the Visible Ops space. I don't know how many people are aware of that. The original Visible Ops handbook, I was part of the study for that, and the security handbook as well. As you can see, I've done a lot on the presenting side. Again, this is about me. I just mentioned that. Okay, this presentation, it's not a lesson in DevOps or Visible Ops. Not a comparison of different scanning tools or details in what those tools have, but I'm going to hit some highlights on it. And I don't think there's any magic bullet for success here. I think it's going to be a combination of a lot of different things. I'm going to try to outline actual observed problems that I've come across over the last year. I'm going to put some metrics in there and definitely have a lot of questions about what we can do to fix them. And hopefully we can bring some awareness and provide some critical tools out there. DevOps, for those who don't know, I just put some high-level notes together. Collaboration between development and operations is pretty much it, and hopefully we can try to leverage that to keep this change and release process going and fix all our problems. Visible Ops, it's a more ITIL-centric methodology. I've been using it before it was even called Visible Ops for years, and I think there's really a good need for the high-performing IT. That's going to give you your stability and your security and just make everything a lot better. I think here, developers and operations people have to both be conscious of the need for both stability and security, and I think that that's lacking. I've been doing some organizations lately that I've been doing for years, and I've seen things go from their infancy where everything was nice and smooth. They didn't do any in-house development, and all their applications are purchased and acquired elsewhere. But I've seen the organization grow for where it was not so stable and not so secure to getting to a peak, and then it just sort of started dropping off. And I think that that's something that happens with organizations. People get complacent. Maybe resources change, whatever you can put on it, but I don't think anybody stays the same. You'll get a big event, you'll get a big incident, and security awareness goes right up. But where is that 6 to 9 months later? It goes down. And hopefully we can try to come up with some kind of a momentum to always check ourselves, to always get into this routine where we're making things better and not letting it slide back down to where it's not good anymore. I don't think the answer is going to come from giving people more authority, money, even necessarily some extra time or tools. I think it's going to come from effective communication and bringing the awareness up, and that's pretty much the topic I wanted to bring out today. And I think also it's probably, in the end, the reality is we're probably going to have to buy some more stuff and, spend some more time on it, but it's going to be a combination. Vulnerability detection, we do a lot of this work for people in different scope, and some people just want us to give a report and here you go, here's what you got, and we'll see you next time it's time to do an assessment. And they don't want to know anything else. In that type of scenario, what I see is the same problems quarter after quarter, year after year. I'm finding the same things over and over again. They're not fixing them, they're not doing anything about it. And I think if all you want is a tool that says I ran it and gave it to you, well then the tool vendors are going to be great and you'll give me money and you're not going to be any more stable or secure. So what I prefer to do and what we do for a lot of our clients is we do a little bit more for them, and I'll go into some of that. This, again, not out of any book. This is just sort of the high level of this kind of thing that I do. My first task is we've got to detect what those findings are, validate what they are, and create a plan to resolve the vulnerabilities. Usually we project manage with whoever our client is to make sure that we're the objective person making sure these things get addressed properly and documented, which is the next 2 bullet points. I've got to confirm that it's been fixed, document how and why and what we did about it. And then that's a report that goes to executive management. And then hopefully we get to do it all over again next quarter. So we use a lot of various custom commercial and freeware tools. I think everybody out there does. If you're not doing it, I recommend you use a broader spectrum and don't just rely on any one tool to get the job done. Don't assume that the findings are complete either. Again, that's where you use different tools. I've come across engagements where I've been on where people have used commercial scanners, not mine, I didn't pick it, And the scanner picked up all these nice, wonderful vulnerabilities, and we're going to report it to the customer, and all that's great. With just Nmap, I was finding ports open to the internet that the scanner didn't even alert on. So, you know, I don't know, maybe somebody else wasn't really looking for it. I didn't program the scanner to do it. But again, I don't assume anything's complete until I'm satisfied I've done everything that I can for it. I don't assume anything's accurate either. There's a lot of false positives out there. I've noticed various scanning vendors out there. You've all probably seen it. Part of the validation process is to confirm whether these are false positives. And sometimes they're just not affecting. You know, yes, this application is on there, and yes, it's got a vulnerability in it, but we're not using that feature, so we're not really affected. Or maybe the version's a little different. Also, during the validation process, I found web servers out there and other services running that the IT people didn't even know about. A little more on that, because I have some metrics on some of this. And basically how broad and deep we go depends on the scope of the engagement. Sometimes it's going to be a compliance thing, and all they want to know is, yeah, just give us a list and we'll fix it. So when I go to validate some of this stuff, I like to use various tools. I'm discovering new tools every time I do something or have a need to find a new vulnerability out there. Whatever I know about the infrastructure, I leverage that information as well. You know, sometimes I know they're not supposed to be any LDAP out here. So I know that already, so I can bring that to their attention. But I verify certain things are up there, just making sure everything's working. And this gets time consuming, and you'll see one of the last engagements I did, I have some metrics on this. You can see how much work actually goes into these things and how many man hours it's going to take to do it. So I'm always looking for new tools, and you know, as an older Unix guy, if I have to do something more than twice, I try to build a tool for it myself because I don't like to type. Anyway, we'll go on here. As I said before, we come up with a plan to resolve it for our clients. And I got a little bit more on that too. But for this presentation, let's just assume that what I'm going to do is help, or you guys, whoever you are, you know, you're going to find your vulnerabilities and you're going to detect them and you're going to resolve them and you're going to work out the full solution. I like to decide on the approach for the resolutions. A lot of times we're getting paid to find them and make sure that they're right and they're resolved and documented. So, you know, when I get to resolve them, there's certain things out there that we're going to do. We try to figure out, would this require a patch, assuming that it's a valid thing. Is it a config? Is it disabling? Am I going to accept it? Am I going to mitigate it? How are we going to resolve these issues? And then we try to sort these things into groups of you know, how we're going to do different things, how we're going to approach this. And, you know, for example, I'll take 500 findings, turn it into 50 tasks, and then give it to the IT folks. That's what they want to know. They don't want me to explain why we have to fix it. They don't want to know the details of it. Somebody's got to go through it, interpret it for them, and give them this interpreted set of tasks. And I find none of the scanning vendors out there allow me to build the reports that I need to do this. They just don't have that capability, and I don't know why. But if anybody has something, I'm open to suggestions. So anyway, we go out there and we resolve the findings. We confirm that the resolutions have been in place. Scanner, you know, device is offline, system's in patch, website's fixed, whatever it is. And then we document that. And a lot of times it's for audit and compliance reasons. Even if they don't have an active audit and compliance program in place, we provide them with the proof that the findings were detected and resolved and put in the who's, the where's, the why's, so there's no question about what was done. We categorize everything in false positives, not affected, whether we just actually corrected the finding, whatever it is, or just accepted the risk. And then the report to executive management. We're telling everybody that, you know, again, what we're doing. We don't whitewash anything. We've satisfied all their compliance and legal obligations, and making sure that everybody's done their job on it. And for that, I don't need the fancy graphs and charts and everything I find in all these tools. It's fluff. It doesn't mean anything. The executives don't care about it. They just want to know, what'd you find? Did you fix it? Do we have any problems to worry about? We're done. And then hopefully we get to do it all again next quarter. As I said earlier, I haven't found a scanner tool that does everything that I just outlined in that. So I think, you know, we all have to work together. I do a lot of this stuff manually. We've got to sort through everything, and it's a real nightmare. One of my opinions on this is that these tools appear to be built by people who don't actually do this for a living. They don't know what they're actually supposed to be doing. Assuming for a moment that the detection engines are all the same and they're all great, which they're probably not. All the reporting, the tracking capabilities, everything in there, I don't find it in there. So I've had to create manual processes, and at some of our customers, we've created those processes and we put them in place, and the internal auditors love it, the external auditors never had a problem with it because we're tracking everything. And I don't find anything automated to do it, which would probably be less billable hours, but you know, what the hell, it's easier. Graphs and charts, I said we don't need them. I'm sorry if some of this is redundant. This was sort of those writing the book and filming the movie, rush to production kind of things, you know. The reports don't work. I've come across devices where the reports don't work at all. There's no data found, yet there's a scanner database full of vulnerabilities. They don't include what management and auditors want. There's no way to sort the stuff, and there's no way to accurately document the findings within a tool. Again, if anybody knows anything, let me know. And I was going to start asking everybody, you know, what you like and dislike about your tools, but maybe we'll get to that a little later. Some of the last assessments that we've done, I found an enormous amount of SSL and TSL problems. Some of it's simple, just expired certificates, self-signed, weak hashes, but this stuff comes up in a very, very high number, a high quantity. I think Nick's presentation, I caught a fair bit of that. He was going on about some of this stuff too. A high number of web server findings, and a lot of this stuff comes through some web applications too. Excuse me, a lot of the IT folks are installing these applications and they've got all these embedded different tools in there. There's everything from databases to web servers to middleware application servers. And we can't patch anything, we can't do anything with it. It's an embedded part of a product. But worse, the IT folks don't even know what's in there. So if you folks are developers and you are building these tools, there's got to be some documentation that you can pass on to the other IT folks to say, hey, this is what you're going to find in there, this is what you're turning on, and these are the risks you're going to have to accept. Some of the other stuff that's in there, we run across the typical OS, the services and network stuff that's on and maybe not supposed to be. Printers are another big issue. I don't know whether you all have noticed this lately or scan your printers. Printers have become very, very smart. They're running operating systems. They're not the same old, you know, firmware on a chip thing that you can just go out there and maybe leave alone. These things are doing a lot of fancy work, and people are not patching them. So we found that they're not isolating them properly enough. They're, because they need to do a lot of these network services, they're not turning off admin GUIs, they're not doing a lot of things that this, we found tons of exploits that we could get in there and then just start launching stuff from a printer and you know, just run amok in the environment. I mentioned the unknown apps that are being installed. IT doesn't know what's going on in there. Developers aren't telling them. We've had the terminal issues and the access control issues as well. So some metrics from some of my stuff on all these other different types of devices, probably some more, but that gives you an idea that it was been broad. One place I did a vulnerability assessment. I found 5,000 findings, probably across only about 100 or so machines. And in this particular case, management, the rest of the IT department, their jaws just fell down, hit the floor. They didn't know what they were going to do to fix all this stuff. And when you looked at what the errors were, there was an LDAP misconfiguration that was allowing email addresses to be seen by the entire internet. All you had to do was go there, hit the right port, and you had email addresses for everyone in the company or connected with the company. And that was fixed by turning off one configuration in the LDAP server and then blocking the port at the firewall. So a 5-minute fix probably took several change management meetings, a lot of potential heart attacks, and it was all fixed, and 5,000 of them just went away in one fell swoop. So the reporting aspect of this was pretty interesting too, because if you looked at that particular commercial tool and went to the, give me a plan for fixing this, it would have taken 7 years to fix all that. You know, I don't understand, you know, how these people figure that stuff out. Another one that I did earlier this year, we had over 3,000 findings, and there were 178 different unique vulnerability names, and over 1,500 of them I considered web or application related, just to give you an idea of what, the kind of stuff that we're seeing out there. I broke some of this down. This is only the stuff that came up as 1% of all that, and when you look at the types that were here, you can see, some of these are system related, Telnet, obviously, Telnet clear text passwords, duh, that's what it does. And when you look at the quantity of them, though, you have to figure that each one of these has to be explained and written off somehow or resolved. And then I went up to here where, these are the higher number ones. Again, a lot of SSL and TSL, TLS ones. Every single one of these had to be resolved. Just a thought on some of this. What I found, though, by looking at some of these things, I couldn't go to the staff and just say, hey, your certificate needs to be updated or it doesn't match the target. Oh yeah, don't worry about that. We don't really need that. And when you think about it, if it's an internal site that you're not worried about that trust relationship, does it really matter whether the certificate's expired or not? Probably not. The encryption's still being done. But what I found was these folks didn't know what was running in their environment. And I'll show you how many different web servers they didn't know about. So my initial conclusions were based on this, that the admins don't have a thorough enough knowledge of their own environment. And when I was building a lot of these things out for especially Viacom and MTV, I knew every process running on every server. I knew every version of every instance. Perl scripts, I knew which modules were installed on which machines. We knew everything. That was our job. And now it just seems that people get sloppy and they don't want to know and they don't want to account for what they're running on their systems. I don't think the developers are conscious of all the stuff they're imposing on the IT folks either. To me, it shouldn't be built into the product. If you don't need it, it should be turned off. That's simple. It's also become impossible to fix a lot of these problems. If it's purchased, you're waiting for the next release and hopefully it's going to be in there. And if it's an embedded application of any kind, even if the developers are in-house, how long is it going to be before you get that application fixed? And from the ops side, I think they too suffer from a lack of knowledge of what they're installing on these systems, and they're not taking the precautions to make sure that these services are taken off or they're not used. They should be off by default. If you don't need SNMP, turn it off. Don't enable it just at will. A lot of non-secure communication protocols in use, a lot of non-secure configurations overall in the systems. I think they're doing sloppy administration, and there's a lack of adequate patching as well. I don't think patching is going to solve every problem, and I think Nick had a slide on this in his presentation. Sometimes patching is going to break stuff, but you have to be conscious of what you're fixing and what you're not fixing. You have to know that ahead of time. When I was doing all the hosting for MTV, you wouldn't believe how old in version our web server actually was, but it was solid and it was working and it was not vulnerable. We kept it up to date as we needed to. Don't need this patch, it doesn't go on a system. And we had it sound. We were doing anywhere between 10 and 17 million hits a day on the website, and we never had a problem delivering. On the dev side, I don't know, maybe there's a lack of adherence to an adequate SDLC. There's a lack of documentation. They're not checking the stuff for security issues prior. If you're using little snippets of code and pieces of framework in there, you got to make sure that that's up to date. If you're just using the same thing a year from now, that stuff's going to have holes in it, and you're just putting the same code together, putting it out there, people are installing it, and you're never going to fix the problems. So, again, in formal development framework, there's no process in there to review some of this stuff. At least that's what I see, anyway. Dependency on frameworks is great, but make sure you're testing it. Actually, last bullet point on there, patching components within applications, and I thought it was interesting. I had no prior knowledge of Nick's presentation, but since most of you probably went there, when he was talking about mobile apps and them patching themselves rather than waiting for the application to patch everything, I think, that kind of goes in with what the last bullet point is in our, I don't have to wait now for my phone to update. It'll update the apps as it needs it. Drains the hell out of my battery on my iPhone, but that's a different story. So anyway, I find there's a lot of lack of communication here, and it's just creating a target-rich environment, low-performing IT, and it's all very unstable. So in my web server example here, I went out, and for every one of those web server issues that were out there, out of there's over 3,000 that I had to check through, I found 138 web server instances that were either broken, they were default web pages, or were not used at all. These accounted for 270 vulnerabilities out of that. So clearly almost 10% of what I found was related to crap being installed on the machines. And I don't know, the ops guys didn't know that it was there, and the developers just threw this stuff into their code. And as I said, I couldn't just list them, because they would have said risk accepted because the cert was expired, or we can't patch cross-site scripting because it's part of application X. I can't let that go by. So I don't know whether you can see it up there. It's a bunch of squiggly lines. That's what I got when I tested one website that they told me they were using for administrative purposes to manage a server. Nice, huh? That's another one that came up from the same, different machine, but admin. It was Tomcat. They didn't even know that this stuff was running on their machine and telling me that that web server was active and they were using it. This one here was great. I found a whole bunch of this stuff out there. Misconfigured web server, broken, I don't know. It's obviously not serving the purpose it was intended to. There's another one. And with the Jetty one, I went to the IT guys and I asked them, what are you using Jetty for? Well, we don't. It's not installed anywhere in the environment. Right there. So again, they didn't know what was there. This one didn't go very well. But yeah, somebody installed Apache on here and it says set up Tomcat successfully. Didn't even know it was running on there. And all these things had multiple vulnerabilities, from cross-site scripting to just server issues to whatever, all just running in the environment. Fortunately, none of this stuff was externally facing. It was all on internal networks that had several layers before the outside. So this slide I stole from one of my previous presentations. Some considerations for application development. Just some considerations for the folks out there that they really need to take into account. I can go through them all, but I want to leave some time here at the end. I'm not quite done. Application acquisition, there's similar things in here, especially with a lot of the cloud technology and people keeping stuff off-site. I think all these checklists are very good. People don't think about what ports they're opening, how secure is that line of communication. They just don't know, and we wait till the last minute. I actually had one client where normally we would do all their application risk assessment before they purchase something, before they do major changes in the architecture. They ask us to review it and go through it and figure out where their holes are going to be, and additional questions that they want to ask when they put out their RFP and things like that. And so at one point they put in a system, they didn't tell us about it, we didn't know anything until they told us next week we're installing this. And what's been happening is every time they install this on one of the Windows desktop machines, every time a user launches a new Windows application, it creates a new DLL, and the endpoint protection stuff is just lighting up like a Christmas tree. And so we got that under control for them, but the issue there was without that testing, nobody knew about it. And when you're pissing off the executives of the company because now the virus scanner has detected potential malware and locked down the application, it's not very good. Another checklist here for a lot of the outsourcing things. Again, this stuff will be online, and that you can take a look for it. But it gives you an idea of the type of things that we always look for as a minimum. And I didn't include any application security checklist in here. We do for a lot of our clients, we actually have a form that we follow, and we hit every single point. It doesn't apply to every single service or app or tool that they're going to use, but we check everything to make sure that the stuff that they're going to install, that we know what the risks are ahead of time. We all know applications are a major attack vector. Educating developers doesn't appear to correct inadequate coding in many instances. Development issues are compounded by carelessness, inadequately developed apps, the rush to release, and mobile apps and cloud. That's going to be interesting to see how some of this stuff pans out as well. Okay. I don't know. This all probably looks familiar to you. People trying to save money and get it out there faster. And I don't think we're going to change the mentality of some of the business management, but I think that a lot of this is part of the root cause. So I was just thinking about that when I was reading through all this, and there is a big failure to communicate. And I don't know how many people have seen Cool Hand Luke. One. Okay. Oh, you guys. Well, you didn't raise your hand. All right. That's from the movie Cool Hand Luke. So it was a good segue in here. I don't recognize most of you also. One of the things I had in some of my previous presentations, I had a little movie, and usually I tied it in with situational awareness. And I think though that it goes into, this kind of borders on some essay type stuff, and anyway. So it's encore movie time. I'm going to stop showing it after this presentation for a while. I think it's getting a little old, but just as a test, so that you folks can see how people are not seeing everything. I don't know whether you've seen this one before. So what I'm going to ask is that you folks on stage right here, my left, the team that you're going to see in the white shirts, you count the ball, how many times they pass the ball. Conversely, you folks on the right, my right, count how many times the folks in the black shirts pass the ball. Does it work? Okay, technical difficulties here. Nope, that's not going to work. Security? Okay.
Just allow it, and I'll talk to you if I get any viruses.
Windows, huh? That's where I'll find it. Okay, there you go. Okay, did you get that? And that's my question of the day. How many times did the gorilla beat his chest? Okay. Who didn't see the gorilla? Okay. Well, you missed it. Okay, so to be honest, 75% of the people don't see the gorilla. You're too focused on the task, in this case, counting what you're supposed to count, that you didn't see this anomaly coming out in there. And, if I was to ask you guys, okay, how many different numbers you think you're going to have for each team? You're all going to have a different number. And if I was to ask you guys, well, you count the white shirts, right? How many times did the team in the black shirts pass the ball? You don't know, because you're focused on what you're doing, not what the other team is supposed to be doing. So, nobody saw the gorilla? Oh, okay, now it comes out there. Okay, so how many times did the gorilla beat his chest?
3, 6, 5.
Okay, see all the different numbers in here, right? Okay, so you saw the gorilla, you counted. Do you know how many times your team passed the ball? You probably lost count, is my point, right? So you saw the anomaly, and you were fixated on that, and you forgot you dropped the ball on the task that you're supposed to do. So this is essentially a lose-lose situation for you all. You're never going to get it right. Okay, so for those of you who didn't see the gorilla, we'll play it one more time. You don't have to count this time. I mean, unless you want to.
And this is your staff?
Just the gorilla. There's a bunch of videos like this out there. A lot of the psychology students, I guess, they got nothing better to do. This one's my favorite, and so I've been showing this one now for a couple of years on and off. And it kind of demonstrates what I was getting at, that you've got to be focused on the whole big picture. The first time I saw this is actually, well, you don't know this, but I'm in the Coast Guard, and we were doing stuff on situational awareness, and that's where I first saw this video, amongst some others, but this one came across as my favorite. And believe it or not, I saw the gorilla the first time out there. We weren't asked to count the ball or anything, I don't remember. Anyway, I saw the gorilla. So I guess maybe that's why it's my favorite. But anyway, maybe as a result of all this, maybe if we got involved in more of the DevOps stuff, or whatever other programming or methodology you want to call it, do you think things would improve? How can we keep our eye on the ball? Is my point. We all got to know what the other ones are doing, and if I know you've got to count how many times your team's going to pass the ball, we've got to worry about that gorilla walking through, and I've got to worry about my job of counting my team. So just some final thoughts on that. Basically, when you're not in control, your time and your resources they're not effectively used. Executive management sees this, and I don't know about you all, but if I'm not perfect, good luck getting my next budget approved. Stability is a big thing. Visible Ops really focuses on that, and high-performing IT. It's necessary and it's possible. And I think, the communication's out there. You just got to spread the word and get out there and just start working within your organizations to go do it. Some of the information, obviously OWASP is up there at the top. For the Visible Ops stuff, you can go look that up. The IT Process Institute has a lot of links to it. I think there's a third book out on the cloud stuff that I haven't been part of. Policy frameworks, believe it or not, if you're looking for that kind of stuff, the FFIEC, we've had to do this for banks. There's a lot of great stuff in there on everything from technology acquisition. And if you're in the financial services market, if you follow just the table of contents for this to get your topics addressed, I think you'll be doing pretty good. And change and release management, another big cool topic of mine. And that's my info. Questions, problems, complaints, criticisms?
Slides are going to be available.
I'm sorry?
Slides are going to be available for the download.
Yeah, these slides will all be available. The movie will just be a picture. I can't. It's a copyright. I don't have I don't have the rights to. You get a picture that says there was a movie here, right? Okay. just to clarify that. Yes, sir.
One question. So it's very good presentation, but are you in business of vulnerability management, or is it like your role is handled?
No, we don't normally manage stuff for customers. We go in and we'll teach you how to manage it using your tools and stuff that you're comfortable with. If you don't have that, we'll evaluate the tool sets that are appropriate for your organization. We do very little recommending of specific products and tools and technology. Well, I would say technology is kind of broad, but specific tools and vendors, we have a couple that we've used that we prefer to use. But in the end, right now, we don't make any money off of it. We don't. If you guys want to go with Cisco, we'll get Cisco in there. We don't make money off the Cisco stuff. You guys deal with that.
Then I ask a more specific question. Did you have any chances when you talk about findings with your customer, and you're saying, oh, this looks like severity is high, and they say, oh, not really,
It's like severity issues. Yeah, well, severities are funny because everybody has a different scale for it. There used to be high, medium, and low, and now there's urgent, critical, high, medium, low. And look at even say a cross-site scripting vulnerability. Right? If I detect it on an internal web server on a development network that is just used for rough development, maybe the developers themselves have access to it, they're playing with it, they're doing different things. Is that an urgent or critical? Maybe the externally facing live production server is, but I don't. I rate those as a little different depending on where it is in the infrastructure. So yeah, I mean there's no set rule on it, but we do that.
Isn't it pain for you to negotiate this severity, or say, well, your customers always agree with whatever you say?
I'm sorry, what?
Is it a pain for you to negotiate?
Is it a pain?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's a big pain in the ass. Yeah. But then again, that's what they're paying us for. They expertise to make the determination, or they don't have the resources to do this. So that's where we come in and we supplement their existing resources. So we'll take the pain out of that for them. And that's why one of the things that we like to do is, that's why a lot of our customers, we project manage that resolution. We're the objective person in there. So if I come to you and say, yeah, well, I think this should be a lower severity, we'll report on that too. And sometimes when we're doing these recommendations for stuff, we can't just say, put this Microsoft patch on these 50 machines and these 100 vulnerabilities go away. Because that's nice if we can get it all down into one, but maybe there's business needs, there's other production outages we have to worry about, so maybe I have to break that down into different tasks. But again, we do that by severity. Again, maybe that external web server, that's a higher severity, that's a different, we'll leave that one as a high, but the internal one, the web server, we'll leave that one as a medium, maybe, so that they fix it a little urgently. Because if you give it as a low, they do that last, right? So we try to appropriately gauge it that way if we have to change the severity or not. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the frequency of quarterly several times.
Yeah.
Is that something that you negotiate with the client, or is that?
It depends on what they need. Some industries have a regulation. Yeah, they have a compliance thing where they'll have to do something quarterly. Even if you get into, say, PCI, depending on what level vendor you are, you might have to do it quarterly, semi-annually, annually, whatever whatever the rating is. Yes, sir.
But this, just piggybacking on that question, that looks like it's more of a compliance-based approach opposed to a risk-based approach. Which it seems like if you're coming back quarterly and they're having all these vulnerabilities, they may need to have a more stringent process in place to.
Sure. Yeah. Some of it is compliance-based. When I was at ABN AMRO, we did vulnerability scans weekly, and the numbers mounted up. But our goal was not necessarily, compliance was part of it. But one of the things that I've been fond of saying for years is, if you're doing everything you can do to secure your environment, and again, we have to worry about business risk. It's not just whether there's a hole in there. Maybe the management does want to accept that particular risk. So it really comes down to business risk. And if they want to accept it, that's fine. But we try to keep it, I always said, if you do what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to be 90% compliant with any of the regulation out there. The rest of it's going to be, you're doing it frequently enough, which you probably are. You're documenting it properly, that kind of accounting for what you're doing. But it's not as difficult to be compliant with regulation if you're doing it right all along. But a lot of people don't do that. Hey, PCI, look at Heartland Payment Systems. They were PCI compliant. They got hacked twice in 18 months. They're not secure. So I think that's it. We're done. Any last question? All right, one last quick one.
Just personally, I've worked in a very formal communication manager change.
Sure.
Have you seen any where vulnerability scanning is part, like an ex post facto?
Yeah, I did some work up at different financial companies in New York as a contractor, and that was part of it. And highs, we only accepted high, medium, and low. Highs had to be fixed within 2 to 4 weeks. It was mandatory.
The checklist is introducing risk to the check.
Yeah, actually, I introduced at ABN AMRO where if a box had too many vulnerabilities on it, before you did any changes to production, you had to fix the vulnerabilities first. So you can integrate it, and it was a tough sell. But since I was in charge of approving all the changes, it was pretty easy. Well, I put the processes in place, even doing administration work, that if you're not going to do it properly, you're not going to do it. And, it was the old, if you don't have time to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it over? And so when I did a Swift banking upgrade at ABN AMRO, it went in pretty flawlessly because the IT guys didn't really want to do anything with it. So I made them give me the hardware, and me and my team, mostly me, we had to use Solaris 10. So we just built a secure box, made a model that was compliant with what Swift needed, but it was harder than what Swift required, but worked. And we rolled it out, and we got that done in 3 weeks. But we made sure we did it right, and that was the point. We couldn't change anything with Swift. I don't know whether you all have to deal with that at all. they tell you, here's what you're going to do. And you don't have a choice. And if you miss the deadline, you get fined like hundreds of millions of dollars for not doing it right. So it had to be done. Guess we're out of time.